You can build a fortress of success, money, status, reputation, and still feel completely defenseless the moment the lights go out. There is a specific kind of strength that does not break, does not bend, and does not negotiate with your feelings. But most of us spend our lives building the wrong kind of armor. We mistake achievement for stability. We think that if we just stack enough wins, enough praise, or enough security around us, we will finally feel safe. But the ancient samurai of feudal Japan understood a terrifying truth that we often ignore. If your strength comes from what you have, you are already broken, because everything you have can be taken away. The Japanese have a term for the antidote to this fragility, and it is called Hagane no Ishi, the will of steel. But here's the catch that most people miss when they hear that translation. Steel is not found in nature. You cannot dig it out of the ground, and you are certainly not born with it. Steel is an invention, a result of violence, heat, and pressure applied to raw iron until its very molecular structure changes. The samurai spent centuries perfecting a psychological process to forge this spirit, not so they could be better at fighting, but so they could become incapable of being broken by fear, pain, or total loss. Today, we are going to walk through that forging process, step by step, by looking at the story of a man who had to lose everything to find the only thing that actually mattered. This story centers on a man named Marcus, a 34-year-old entrepreneur who, by every modern metric, had won the game. Over 5 years, he had built a tech startup from a garage concept into a market leader, sacrificing his sleep, his health, and his relationships to keep the machine running. And for a while, the sacrifice seemed worth it. The company grew, investors applauded, and his bank account swelled. Marcus was living the American dream, until the logic of the market shifted. A larger competitor
launched a product that rendered his technology obsolete overnight. 2 key investors backed out within 48 hours. His team began to abandon ship, and for the first time in his life, Marcus had no move to make. He sat in his empty office at 2 in the morning, staring at a blank screen, and realized something that frightened him more than the bankruptcy. He realized he had no idea who he was without the success. His entire identity, his sense of worth, his confidence, was built on the condition of winning. Now that he was losing, he wasn't just stressed, he was evaporating. Anxiety arrived first, followed by insomnia, and then debilitating panic attacks that left him unable to make even basic decisions about what to eat for lunch. The pressure had broken something inside him that he didn't even know was fragile. And this is where the risk quietly increases for all of us. We tie our stability to variable outcomes. When the outcomes change, we collapse. A mentor of his, a man named James Watanabe, who walked the line between high-stakes investing and traditional Japanese discipline, saw the collapse happening. He told Marcus something that cut through the noise. He said, "You don't have a business problem, you have a spirit problem. You built a house on sand, and now that the tide has risen, you are discovering there is no foundation." Marcus tried to argue, but James cut him off. He told him that the samurai believed the spirit must be stronger than the circumstance. He took Marcus to meet a man named Tanaka-sensei, a 70-year-old master of kenjutsu who operated a dojo in a nondescript basement in the city center. When they met, Tanaka couldn't offer sympathy. He held up an ancient katana and asked Marcus if he knew how steel was made. He explained that ordinary iron is weak. It is full of impurities and air bubbles. If you hit it hard, it snaps. But when you heat iron to 1500 degrees, add carbon, hammer it repeatedly, and quench it in water,
aren't just shaping it. You are traumatizing the metal into a new form. Tanaka pointed at Marcus and told him the hard truth. Your spirit is currently iron. It is soft. It is impure. The first real pressure deformed it. Bushido is the process of turning iron into steel, but you cannot jump over the fire. Marcus was hoping for a meditation technique or a morning routine, something easy to add to his calendar. Tanaka laughed at the idea. He told him that forging a spirit isn't about adding things. It's about removing everything that is weak until only the indestructible remains. Over the next few weeks, Marcus was subjected to a brutal system of deconstructing his own identity, starting with the first principle called Shin, the principle of right spirit. It began with facing the void. Tanaka asked Marcus what he feared most. Marcus gave the standard answers about losing his business, losing his money, or disappointing his employees. Tanaka shook his head and waited. He waited through 1 minute, then 2, then 5 minutes of excruciating silence. Finally, Marcus admitted the truth. He said, "I am afraid of being nobody. I am afraid of being ordinary and forgettable." Tanaka nodded. This was the raw iron. Marcus had built his entire life running away from the feeling of insignificance, covering it up with achievements. The samurai practice for this is often misunderstood as morbid, but it is actually liberating. They called it memento mori, meditating on death. Every samurai meditated daily on their own end, not to be depressed, but to confront the ultimate fear, complete annihilation. Tanaka explained that when you face the reality that you will die, that you will lose everything eventually, the fear of losing money or status loses its grip. If you are going to die anyway, what does it matter if you look foolish in a meeting? Tanaka gave Marcus an exercise that seemed counterintuitive to productivity. Every morning, before checking email or drinking coffee, he had to sit in silence for 20 minutes and visualize his own end in detail. He had to imagine his body stopping, the world continuing without him, and his achievements turning to dust. Marcus hated it. It felt heavy and pointless. But here is the part most people miss about exposure. In the second week, the fear began to lose its intensity. A neuroscientist at Stanford who has studied fear responses for nearly 2 decades has shown that when you repeatedly expose the brain to a fearful stimulus in a controlled way, the amygdala, the brain's alarm bell, literally decreases its reactivity. The brain learns the threat is manageable. Marcus realized that compared to the void of death, losing a business was just a logistical problem. It was annoying, but it wasn't fatal. But Tanaka wasn't done. He told Marcus that he had faced physical annihilation, but now he had to face social annihilation. This brings us to the second principle of Bushido, Jin, or benevolence through strength. But you cannot be benevolent if you are needy. Tanaka explained that a warrior who needs approval is a controllable warrior, and a controllable warrior is weak. If you need people to think you are smart, they own you. The prescription was a series of exercises designed to kill the ego. Tanaka told Marcus to do something publicly embarrassing every week. The goal wasn't to be disrespectful, but to invite judgment and survive it. Week 1, Marcus had to walk through the city wearing completely mismatched, ridiculous clothing. Week 2, he had to sing loudly on a crowded subway train. Week 3, he had to dance alone in a busy public square. Marcus resisted violently. He argued that this was a waste of time and had nothing to do with saving his company. Tanaka was blunt. You still think your problem is the company. Your problem is that you cannot exist without approval. You are fragile because your identity is in the hands of strangers. So Marcus did it. He walked out in a floral shirt and striped pants. He felt every stare like a physical blow. His brain screamed that everyone was judging him, that he was ruining his reputation. But after 30 minutes, a strange realization settled in. Nothing happened. The world didn't end. Most people didn't care, and those who did stare forgot about him 10 seconds later. By the time he was singing on the subway, the embarrassment was intense, but he noticed that the discomfort was entirely internal. It was his own ego fighting for survival. When he danced in the square, he didn't feel happy, but he felt free. He realized he could be judged, he could look like a fool, and he could still be whole. This is the concept of mujo, impermanence. Approval is temporary. Disapproval is temporary. The only permanent thing is the spirit you forge. But just as Marcus was beginning to feel stronger, Tanaka introduced the third principle, and this one was not about playing games in public. It was about making a choice that would tear Marcus apart. The principle was gi, righteousness, or doing the right thing when it costs you everything. Tanaka asked Marcus the difference between iron and steel again. He said,
Iron bends under pressure. Steel holds its shape. An iron spirit does the right thing when it is convenient. A steel spirit does the right thing, especially when it is not. Tanaka looked at Marcus and told him he knew he was avoiding a specific decision regarding his business. Marcus froze. He knew exactly what Tanaka meant. He had a co-founder, his best friend from college, who was dragging the company down. This friend was unmotivated, toxic to the culture, and incompetent in the new market reality. But Marcus had avoided the conversation for months because he valued his comfort over the necessary action. He was letting the ship sink because he didn't want to have a hard conversation. Tanaka told him, "You are prioritizing emotional comfort over integrity. That is iron behavior. You are bending. Steel does not negotiate."
Steel does what needs to be done, regardless of the personal cost. This is the concept of giri, duty above feeling. It doesn't mean you are cold. It means that when you know what is right, you do it, even if it breaks your heart. Marcus spent 3 days agonizing. His mind generated 1,000 excuses to delay the firing. But on the 4th day, he remembered the lesson of the steel. He realized that every day he waited, he was trading himself to be weak. He set the meeting. The conversation was catastrophic. There was shouting, tears, and the destruction of a 12-year friendship in under an hour. Marcus left the room feeling hollowed out, questioning if he was a monster. When he arrived at the dojo that night, he expected Tanaka to offer reassurance. Instead, Tanaka simply nodded and asked, "Do you feel the pain?" Marcus said yes. Tanaka replied, "Good. That means you have a heart. But you did it anyway. That means you have a spirit of steel. Iron avoids pain. Steel accepts pain as the cost of integrity." This was a pivotal shift. Courage is not the absence of fear or pain. It is the ability to act correctly while feeling those things. But isolated acts of courage do not make a life. Tanaka knew that adrenaline fades and heroic moments are rare. The true forge of the spirit is found in the grind. This led to the 4th principle, rei, respect through ritual. This is where most self-improvement advice fails. We rely on motivation. We rely on feeling like doing the work. The samurai relied on form. Tanaka explained that form creates substance. If you repeat a precise set of actions every single day, regardless of how you feel, you eventually become the form. He gave Marcus a protocol. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. For the next 100 days, Marcus would wake up at 4:30 a.m. No negotiation. He would perform 15 minutes of visualization. He would execute 100 perfectly formed wooden sword cuts. He would take a cold shower for exactly
3 minutes. And then he would begin his workday. Marcus tried to argue for balance. He talked about rest and flexibility. Tanaka cut him off, asking, "Do you want steel or iron? Iron is flexible. It bends. Steel is rigid. You have spent 34 years being flexible, and look where it got you." We often mistake flexibility for wisdom, when often it is just a sophisticated way to procrastinate. We negotiate with ourselves. We tell ourselves we will do it later, or that we need to be in the right headspace. Tanaka was teaching him that the right headspace does not exist. There is only the action. The first week was physiological warfare. When the alarm went off at 4:30 a.m., Marcus's mind offered every logical reason to stay in bed. You need sleep to function. One day won't matter. But he forced his feet to the floor. The cold shower was pure misery. His body wanted to recoil. But he learned that the suffering of the cold lasted 3 minutes, while the suffering of knowing he quit would last all day. By day 14, the sword cuts began to flow. His body was memorizing the movement. By day 21, the negotiation in his head went silent. He simply woke up and moved. A behavioral researcher at Oxford has noted that discipline is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. But more importantly, when you automate your behavior, you stop wasting energy deciding whether or not to do the right thing. You just do it. But the universe has a way of testing any structure you build. On day 32, the system collapsed. Marcus caught a severe flu with a high fever. He was shaking, exhausted, and barely able to stand. His mind immediately seized the opportunity. Finally, a legitimate excuse. You are sick. Go back to sleep. It was the perfect out.
no one would blame him. And this is where the advice sounds right, but can still be dangerous. Most people would say, listen to your body. Tanaka had taught him something different. He said,
Real test of steel isn't when the machinery is working perfectly. It is when the system breaks down. Anyone can be disciplined when they feel good. Steel is disciplined when it is impossible. Marcus couldn't do the 100 standing cuts. He physically would have collapsed. So he sat on the edge of his bed and did 10 slow, deliberate cuts. He couldn't handle the freezing shower, so he splashed cold water on his face for 3 minutes. He didn't abandon the form. He adapted it. This distinction is critical. If you create a gap in your discipline because of a circumstance, your brain learns that circumstances dictate your behavior. If you maintain the thread, even in a reduced capacity, you reinforce the identity that you are the one in control. He survived the illness, but the greatest threat was yet to come. It wasn't failure that almost broke him. It was success. On day 50, the business started to turn around. A new investor showed interest. The team stabilized. The crisis began to recede. And immediately, Marcus's brain whispered, "You've made it. You don't need this extreme routine anymore. You can relax." Tanaka called this the poison of success. Failure forces you to change, but success seduces you into thinking you are finished. Samurai understood that victory is the moment of greatest danger, because that is when you stop sharpening the blade. Marcus almost fell for it. He considered sleeping in. He considered skipping the cold water, but he caught himself. He realized that the practice wasn't about the business. The business was just a variable. The practice was the constant. He wasn't training to save the company. He was training to save himself. Then came day 73, the ultimate test. The investor who was supposed to save the company disappeared without a trace. Another key employee resigned. And then the phone rang. Marcus's father had been rushed to the hospital with a heart condition in a different state. Marcus had to drop everything and fly. He was suddenly in a chaotic hospital environment, sleeping in a chair, eating vending machine food, completely stripped of his controlled routine. His mind offered the obvious solution. This is an emergency. Family comes first. Pause the routine. But Marcus was different now. In the sterile hallway of the hospital, while his father was in surgery, Marcus stood in a corner and performed invisible sword cuts with his hands, counting the rhythm in his head. He went to the hospital bathroom and splashed cold water on his face for 3 minutes. It wasn't perfect. It looked crazy to anyone watching, but he wasn't doing it for them. He realized that a samurai doesn't train for the battle. He trains because he is a samurai. The external world, the hospital, the failing business, the stress was irrelevant to his internal standard. By the time day 100 arrived, there was no party. There was no finish line celebration. Marcus simply woke up at 4:30 a.m. and did the work. But the man looking back in the mirror was unrecognizable. He went to the dojo for a final review with Tanaka. The master asked him if he understood the meaning of the will of steel now. Marcus thought about it. He said, "It means acting correctly regardless of how I feel." Tanaka nodded, but corrected him. He picked up the sword one last time. He said, "You are close, but remember the forging process. We heat the steel and hammer it to remove impurities. These 100 days didn't make you strong, Marcus. They removed what was weak." This is the profound shift. The process of forging an unbreakable spirit is not about becoming something you are not. It is about subtracting the fear, the ego, the laziness, and the dependence on validation until only the essential self remains. And the essential self cannot be broken because there is nothing fragile left in it. So, what happened to the business? This isn't a fairy tale. 6 months later, despite the new discipline, the company failed. It
Went to zero. Marcus had to close the doors and let everyone go. And for the first time in his life, he was okay. He wasn't happy, but he was intact. He realized he was the steel, not the sword. The business was just the shape the steel had taken for a while. Now, he would simply be hammered into a new shape. 3 weeks later, he started a new project. He moved with a terrifying calmness. People asked him how he wasn't devastated. He simply told them he had been forged. The secret of the will of steel is that the process never ends. Life will always find a hotter fire, a heavier hammer. But once you know you can survive the heat,
You stop fearing the fire. You walk into it because you know that on the other side, you will be sharper, harder, and truer than you were before. But this brings us to a dangerous assumption that most people make when hearing a story like Marcus's. We assume that to forge a will of steel, we need a catastrophe. We think we need to lose a business, or have a master like Tanaka, or live in a monastery in Kyoto to find this level of resolve. That assumption sounds logical until you look closer at the reality of your own life. You don't need a catastrophe to break you. Modern life is designed to erode your spirit slowly, day by day, without you even noticing until it is too late. The samurai fought enemies with swords, which was terrifying but simple. You, however, are fighting an enemy that is much more insidious because it is invisible. You are fighting comfort. You are fighting an environment engineered by the smartest people on the planet to keep you sedated, distracted, and weak. The algorithms in your pocket are designed to fracture your attention. The convenience of food delivery and climate control is designed to eliminate physical struggle. We live in a world that screams that you should always be comfortable, that you should always be entertained, and that if something is hard, there is probably an app to solve it. This is where
the risk quietly increases. When you remove all resistance from your life, your spirit goes dormant. It is basic biology. If you do not stress a bone, it loses density. If you do not stress a muscle, it atrophies. And if you do not stress your will, you become a person who cannot handle a traffic jam, let alone a crisis. You become driftwood, floating wherever the current takes you, reactive instead of active. So, how do you apply the principles of the Forge in a world that wants you to be soft? You do not need a dojo. You need a code. You need to artificially introduce the friction that civilization has removed. This starts with what behavioral psychologists call voluntary hardship. It means choosing to do something difficult when you don't have to, simply to prove to your brain that you are the one driving. This might look different for you than it did for Marcus. It might mean that for the next 100 days, you commit to a period of absolute silence every morning. No phone, no podcasts, no news, just you and your own thoughts. In a world of constant noise, silence is an act of rebellion. It forces you to confront the internal dialogue you have been drowning out with distractions. You will find that in that silence, the same fears Marcus faced will bubble up. The fear of being behind, the fear of missing out, the fear of not being enough. This is good. You cannot defeat an enemy you refuse to look at. Another practical application is the physical contract. The samurai viewed their bodies as instruments of their will. Today, we mostly view our bodies as billboards for vanity. We train to look good, but to forge a spirit, you must train to feel resistance. This is why you see so many high performers drawn to endurance sports or heavy lifting. It isn't about the medal. It is about the moment at mile 20 or the moment under a heavy bar where your brain screams, "Stop," and your spirit says, "No." Every time you override that voice of weakness, you are
hammering the steel. You are tallying a vote for the person you want to become. And here is the part most people miss. The victory is not in the workout itself. The victory is in the negotiation you win before the workout even starts. It is the moment you are tired, it is raining, and you have a valid excuse, but you go anyway. That split-second decision is the forge. But be warned, when you start this process, you will hit what is known as the Valley of Despair. In the beginning, day 1 to day 10, you will run on motivation. It is new, it is exciting, you feel like a warrior. But around day 20, the novelty fades, the dopamine crash hits. You will look at your early wake-up time or your difficult project, and you will think, "This is stupid. I don't need to do this. I'm happy enough as I am." This is the filter. This is why 99% of people never change. They mistake boredom for failure. They think that because the excitement is gone, the process isn't working. But the samurai understood that boredom is actually part of the heat. Doing the same cut with a sword 10,000 times is incredibly boring, but it is in the boredom that the mastery is found.
It is in the repetition that the form becomes permanent. When you want to quit because it is no longer fun, you must realize that you have finally arrived at the real work. Let's talk about the consequences of not doing this. If you choose to stay as iron, reactive, soft, and impure, you are not just choosing a life of mediocrity, you are choosing a life of anxiety. The unforged spirit is terrified of change because it knows it cannot hold its shape. You will spend your life tiptoeing around potential problems, avoiding difficult conversations, and shrinking your world until it is small enough to feel safe. You will become a prisoner of your own comfort. But there is a different way to live. Imagine waking up and knowing, with absolute certainty, that you can handle whatever the day throws at you. Imagine
Receiving bad news and feeling your pulse remain steady. Imagine losing a job or a relationship and feeling pain, yes, but not panic. This is the promise of the will of steel. It is the freedom that comes from self-trust. You can start your own 100-day protocol today. You don't need to announce it on social media. In fact, it is better if you don't. The samurai believed in silent power. When you broadcast your intentions, you get a hit of dopamine that tricks your brain into thinking you have already accomplished the goal. Keep it to yourself. Pick 3 non-negotiable actions, one for the mind, one for the body, and one for the spirit. Maybe it is reading 20 pages of something difficult, doing 50 push-ups, and meditating for 10 minutes. It doesn't matter what the actions are, it matters that they are absolute. For 100 days, you do not negotiate. If you miss a day, you don't beat yourself up, you simply acknowledge the crack in the steel and you start again. But you must be honest with yourself. As you walk this path, people around you might change. Some will be inspired, but others will be uncomfortable. Your discipline will hold a mirror up to their lack of it. They might tell you that you are being too intense, that you need to live a little. Smile at them, but do not waver. They are trying to pull you back into the warm, soft iron pile because your transformation threatens their worldview. There is a Japanese concept called kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold lacquer. Instead of hiding the cracks, they highlight them. The bowl becomes more beautiful and more valuable because it has been broken and put back together. This is the final lesson of the Forge. You are not trying to be perfect. You are not trying to be a robot that never feels pain or sadness. You are trying to be kintsugi. You are taking your past failures, your fears, and your weaknesses, and you are binding them together with the gold of discipline.
Marcus, in our story, lost his business, but he gained a life. He stopped performing for an audience that didn't care and started living for a standard he defined. You have that same opportunity. The fire is burning. The hammer is ready. The raw material is the person you see in the mirror every morning. The only question that remains is whether you are willing to stay on the anvil long enough to become something unbreakable. So, here is your takeaway. Do not wait for the perfect time. Do not wait until you feel motivated. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings are like the weather. They change every 10 minutes. Discipline is a decision. It is a contract you sign with yourself. Start your count today. Day 1. One action, no negotiation. Because in the end, life is going to hit you. It is going to hit you hard. It is going to take things you love and wreck plans you made. That is not pessimistic, that is reality. The only variable you get to control is what you are made of when the impact happens. Will you shatter like glass, or will you ring like a bell? The choice is yours, and the forging begins now.